everyone. I'm super excited about this episode today because I'm going to get to talk about my two biggest passions, animals and leadership. In this episode, I'm going to be combining them together. I've been a volunteer at the Etobicoke Humane Society for 5 years now. I've actually also adopted my 14-year-old senior cat from there. Her name is Angel. Sometimes she's the devil. She's definitely the boss of this house. But I can honestly say that volunteering at this organization has been the most fulfilling and rewarding experience of my life. And it gives me so much joy to see that we're going to be reopening again soon. It is my honor to have today Cristina Scassa, who is the president of the Etobicoke Humane Society for the last 2 terms. Cristina, how are you doing today?
I'm very good, sir. Thank you for having me. I'm so honored that you asked me to be part of your show. Thank you.
I'm happy to have you here. So, Cristina, can you start by telling our viewers and listeners how you came about to become the president of the Etobicoke Humane Society? What is your background and how did you get here?
Sure. So I worked in banking my entire career, and I retired and I worked in Canada and the United States. And when we moved back from the United States, I retired. So that was the end of 2015. And I took about a year to sort of just get caught up on my own things that I needed to get caught up on. And then around about the time I was sort of lifting my head up and saying, I feel like I could be doing something more, I got a phone call from someone at the Etobicoke Humane Society wanting to see whether or not I'd be interested in standing for president. And they were in particular looking for somebody with a risk management background at that time. Okay. And that was my background in banking. So I sort of went, well, let me find out more. And here I am.
And was it a passion for animals that led you here? Or was it a passion for nonprofit? Or what exactly was it?
So I have always been passionate about animals in general and animal welfare. But I think what sort of attracted me to EHS was the business model, that it was 100% donation-based, 100% volunteer, and it essentially was an opportunity to lead, if you will, a small business that I had, previously I'd been big corporate. And so the idea of being able to lead a small business held a great deal of appeal. And the fact that that was in a business that involved helping dogs and cats just made it all that much more interesting.
Yes. So when you started as the president, what were your goals and objectives?
So I'll say at first, Sehr, I took some time just to understand the organization and meet the volunteers and talk to the people who were actually doing the great work of the shelter. And the thing that I realized after doing all of that is the thing that EHS really needed was a foundation for sustainability. So there were always really, really great people doing great work and helping animals. But in order for the organization to continue and to thrive and to grow, you needed to make sure that you had the right foundational pieces in place: infrastructure, technology, fundraising, jobs that were right-sized for volunteers to do. I think, we touched on just about every part of the shelter in the 4 years that I was there, but it was that whole notion of getting EHS to the place where it wasn't just dependent on 1 or 2 people, that it could survive sustainably and continue to help animals.
Right. So when you talk about the organizational structure of the Humane Society as a whole, are all the Humane Societies integrated? Are they completely separately run? Like, is Toronto Humane connected to Etobicoke or no?
So it's a really great question, and we get that question a lot. So the Etobicoke Humane Society is independent. It's not affiliated with any other shelter or rescue or animal organization. However, we do have partnerships with lots of people, but we are independent. Toronto Humane Society is also independent. But an organization like Toronto Animal Services or Hamilton Animal Services is affiliated with the city. So that's a city-run program. They receive their funding from the city, and they have a broader mandate than we would in terms of helping in abuse cases, for instance, and hoarding cases and things like that. Like, they have a broader public health mandate, I guess is the best way to say that. So
I see, because I think there's a lot of confusion out there. I have a lot of friends, like sometimes I tell them I'm at the Etobicoke Humane Society and they're like, oh yeah, we donate there. And I'm like, you do? And then it turns out that they're donating actually to the Toronto Humane
right.
Society and they think it's all the same thing. But it's
Yes.
essentially, it's not. So I think
It
it's
is not.
important for us to be able to educate people that they're all individual organizations that need funding individually.
Yes. Thank you for calling that point out, Sarah, because it's very important to us.
Very important, yeah. So Cristina, how many people are part of the Etobicoke Humane Society?
So I will apologize in advance with the pandemic and the fact that we haven't been operating the shelter. I don't have a really good handle on that number because I think we've lost some volunteers during the pandemic as they've not had to come in and do their cat or dog shifts. But prior to the pandemic, we had about 400 volunteers at the Etobicoke Humane Society.
Wow, 400 volunteers.
Yes, yes.
So now as we're starting to reopen, we're going to try and see how many we have coming back and so forth, maybe find some new ones.
Absolutely. Yeah, we know we've lost some, and that's okay. I mean, it happens anyway, but we also have a lot of volunteer applications that we're excited to start to be able to process. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Perfect. So Cristina, I don't know how much you know about my company, but I have a small, company that I run. It's called my Condo Source. It's about 10 or 11 people. That includes the salespeople and the support staff. So I've been very fortunate in the past 2 years to be able to grow my business, start this team. And while growth is amazing, it helps me achieve higher goals for myself, expand my business, go into new areas of real estate that I wasn't able to before. Of course, we know the leadership comes with a lot of challenges as well. Could you talk to me about some of the challenges you faced while leading a team of volunteers over your terms?
Sure. And I think it's a really important topic for not-for-profits in general, but particularly at the Etobicoke Humane Society. So one of the first things that I will say is we love our volunteers and we know that they are giving of their time over and above all the other things in their lives. So over and above their family commitments, over and above their work commitments, even sometimes their social commitments. I mean, we need volunteers to come in on Saturday night to take care of the animals. And, some people have lives and are out on Saturday nights. At least they were pre-pandemic. So one of the big challenges when you're leading a group of volunteers is recognizing that they have all these other demands and accommodating those constraints that they have in the things that you do, and recognizing if something shifts in those foundational pieces like their home life or their work life, that you could lose a valued volunteer very quickly. So let's say we had one volunteer, a young man, and his wife had a baby, and he was like, sorry, I got to go. I can't do this anymore. Or if you all of a sudden have an elder care situation arise and you can't contribute the time. So you need to be nimble and dynamic about how you staff roles at the shelter. The other thing that I would say is we have to be cognizant of the fact that we can't ask a volunteer to give 20 or 30 hours a week. Now, some do, and we're hugely grateful for that, but it is much more realistic to expect a volunteer to give 5 hours a week. And so we have to look at the roles that we have at the shelter and make sure that they're right-sized so that a volunteer can actually make the contribution in the time that they have available and that they don't become overburdened and stressed out and then leave. So those are probably some of the bigger challenges that we have with a volunteer workforce.
Yeah. So Cristina, when you came in to the organization, it was being run very differently at that time. So how were you able to collaborate and get everybody with your vision on board to align with your goals of how you thought that it should be run going forward? Was that a challenge for you?
So in some cases it was, Sarah. I think that every volunteer at the shelter is united behind the goal of helping animals. And there was never really any question about that. But of course, sometimes the how you help the animal became the issue. And so What I tried to do was be as collaborative and as engaging with all of the volunteers, particularly those in the leadership positions, to make sure that they were heard. They were invited to be part of the strategic planning process. We improved our volunteer communication so they knew what other things were going on throughout the organization. It would be, and I'm not going to say we're perfect now, but if you were a cat or a dog volunteer, you might not have good line of sight as to what the fundraising team was doing or what the facilities team was doing. And so we did a lot of work to improve communication to volunteers. We made investments in things that made the volunteers' life easier, whether it was technology or facilities related work. You'll know, Sarah, that we, because Sarah's one of our great dog volunteers, and so we're super happy to have her. But you'll remember that we upgraded all of the kennels on the dog side, which just made it safer for the volunteers and an easier environment to maintain and clean and keep the dogs happy. And so when you're making those investments that are aligned with your objectives and also benefit the volunteers, I think you actually build a better culture and better alignment amongst the volunteers.
Right. So what would you say was your biggest success while being the president at the Etobicoke Humane Society?
Excuse me. So I would say that absolutely everything was a team effort. So I'm going to talk about the successes of the Etobicoke Humane Society. So we have increased adoption numbers year over year. And so that's at the top of the list. We've been able to help many more animals than we were helping when back in 2017 when I joined. And that's a function of more fundraising to be able to do that, more volunteers, different processes, all of those things. So I would say that was one of the biggest things. Then I would say we've made some really great investments in infrastructure towards that sustainability goal that we talked about, the dog kennels. We've implemented new communication systems, and I won't call it exactly database technology, but technology to help us be more efficient. We've clarified roles for people at EHS. We have we have been able to make material improvements in our whole fundraising organization. So we're now more effective at how we raise money. We've improved our communications both to donors and to volunteers. So those are all things that I'm very proud of and that I feel like position EHS well for the future. So.
That's amazing. That's incredible that you were able to achieve so much in such a short period of time.
As I said, it was a team effort and there were lots of people to thank for all this work. Yeah.
So Cristina, let's get into the nuts and bolts of what actually happens at the Etobicoke Humane Society. So you said EHS is 100% donation-based, 100% volunteer-run. Does this make EHS unique?
It makes us special, but not unique. So there are other organizations that are volunteer-run, donation-based. Not all of them. So for instance, Toronto Humane Society is donation-based, but they have paid staff. Like we have a veterinarian or two on staff, and they have trainers and other people on staff. But some of the other smaller rescues and shelters are 100% volunteer, 100% donation based. I think for us, the measure that we look at there is how, given that is our base, how effective are we at helping the animals in our care?
Right. So how do the animals come to the EHS? Like are they all strays? Are they coming from abroad? Is it a mixture? Are they abused pets?
Yes, it is a mixture. So at the most general level, we have two categories of sources of animals. So we have what we call owner surrenders. So someone who can no longer care for their animal, and they approach us to take it. And then we take it in and sometimes it needs medical care, and then we will find it a new forever home. And we really encourage people who can no longer care for their animals to let a group like us take care of the responsibility of finding the animal a new home. Just because we can make sure that it's going to a good home. as opposed to, say, putting it on Kijiji or dealing with total strangers in that situation. So
Or
owner
just
surrenders is a, I'm sorry?
or just dumping it somewhere. There's people who just let their animals out of the house and say good luck,
Yes, that is
awful.
true too. That is true too. And so please get in touch with us. The second major source is transfers from kill shelters, and transfers from other organizations that are looking for our help in terms of the animals in their care. So for instance, on the cat side, we bring a lot of cats in from shelters in Ontario and Quebec, because there are lots of cats. A funny story, Sarah, that kind of relates to your real estate business is I think you know that July 1st is moving day in Quebec.
Yeah.
And shelters in Quebec get really full around moving day. And so that's an opportunity for us to take cats in. On the dog side, we bring dogs in from other local shelters where they need our help. We bring dogs in from Northern Ontario, Northern Manitoba. Mostly these are dogs that have never lived in a home, and are at risk of, well, they're just living on the streets kind of thing. So they are at risk of all sorts of unpleasant things like illness or accidents and that kind of thing. So we work with partners to bring those dogs in. And then when we have the capacity, we bring dogs in from overseas, because there are countries that have significant overpopulations of dogs and are looking for ways to find those dogs homes in Canada. And so where we have the capacity to do so, we will help them.
And are we paying for these flights, or how does that process work?
So it varies a bit. In Canada, and actually too in the Caribbean, when the flights reopen, some airlines are particularly good about allowing dogs to travel in with someone. And so there's actually a fairly robust industry of tourists bringing one dog back for a local rescue.
I did that this January, actually, for somebody. Yeah.
Excellent. Good for you. Good for you. So if you're, I don't know where you went, Sarah, but for instance, if you go to Mexico and you get in touch with, before you go, you should do it.
It was Mexico. Yeah.
You get in touch with a local rescue, and you can make arrangements to bring a dog back. And that actually significantly helps defray the costs. During the pandemic, charities have been funding private planes to bring dogs up from the Caribbean, which is a very expensive undertaking. We sometimes will contribute to the travel costs for these travel and veterinary costs for these dogs, because they come to us fully vaccinated, spayed or neutered, and essentially ready to adopt. And so the local rescues that don't have a lot of resources appreciate if we can help defray some of those veterinary costs.
So what's the process once the dog arrives? Like they arrive at the doorstep of the shelter. What happens next?
So for both dogs and cats, they come into our care. And right now we work to find them a foster. So they come into our care, and within 24 hours, they are moved out to a foster. We take the first little while to get to know the dog or the cat. So we will, are they friendly? Are they afraid of men? Do they bark a lot? That kind of thing. So we get to know the animal, and then and they may also have medical needs that we need to address. We always get them to the vet. We check them for, particularly these days, tick-borne illnesses and things like that. And then once we know them from a behavior perspective, and once they have a good bill of health, we will post them for adoption. And then the whole adoption process kicks in.
So the adoption process starts. So for anybody who's watching who says we might be ready to adopt like a cat or a dog, what's that process look like? Like, how do they go about adopting it, and how do you internalize on who gets that animal, so to speak?
Sure. So we post dogs and cats that are available for adoption on our website, and we provide photographs, sometimes a video, and we give you as much information as we know about the dog or the cat. And as we learn more, we update it. And then we open the dog or the cat for applications. So you would look at the dog And I'm just going to say one of the dogs on our website right now, Condo, I'm going to use him as an example because apparently he's a really great dog. And so I'm just going to use him as an example. So you go in and you decide, hey, I like the look of Condo. I can meet the qualifications that they've laid out here. So if we say a dog can't go to an apartment, it's because the dog will bark when you're not there, and that will drive your neighbors crazy. And then after 2 weeks, you're going to come back to us and say, we need to give you the dog back. And that's not fair to the dog. So we really ask that you make sure you understand what we think makes sense for the dog and understand that we don't do that. We don't do that randomly. It's based on our knowledge of the dog and how we can find the right home for the dog. You submit an application for the dog that you've identified. So you put in an application for Hondo or Benson if you're looking for a cat. And then your application goes into a database, and each dog or cat has a adoption coordinator, who will reach out to you, will interview you to make sure that you are, in fact, who you say you are. Maybe ask you some additional questions, clarification questions about, who's in the home, how often are there visitors, is everybody on side with this adoption? We will then do a virtual home visit. So you say you live in a house with a yard. Let's do a Zoom or a some sort of video view of that, so we can make sure that is where you are. And then when we are satisfied that you meet the criteria for the dog or the cat, for the dog, we will arrange a visit. So you'll meet the dog usually at our facility in the backyard, so it's outside, but we can also meet at a park where you'll get to meet the dog, see how the dog interacts with you. We like the dog to meet everybody in your family so that we can get a sense of, is everybody really on side? It may come as a surprise to you, but we've had people say, yes, they were on side to adopting a particular dog. But when we actually got them to meet the dog, we realized that one of them was absolutely terrified of dogs. And so clearly not a good fit. And then if everything goes well, you're given an adoption contract to sign, you remit the fee, and the dog becomes yours. I forgot to mention, Sarah, that we process applications on a first come, first serve basis too. So sometimes when we have the cute little puppy that everybody wants, look at that.
I laughed in the middle of the interview. This is one of my rescues. Beep.
Is that Angel?
No, this is actually Beep. She's another rescue of mine.
Oh,
she decided she wants to be part of this, I guess.
Perfect. So that's the process that we follow now. Prior to COVID, you had the opportunity sometimes to meet the dogs at the shelter before you submitted an application, but we had to invert it to minimize contact. But that's the process that we follow right now. Cats are very similar. There isn't usually the same opportunity to meet the cat, but with dogs, we felt that was really important.
Now, if someone's watching and they're not ready to adopt a pet, is there other ways that they can help?
There certainly are. There's lots of ways to help. So one of the things that we need, both on the cat side and the dog side, is fosters. We need people who are prepared to open their home to a dog or a cat for a period of time. The foster relationship is a great one in this for people who are either not sure whether they are ready for a dog or a cat right now, or who know that they love dogs and cats, but their lifestyle, maybe they travel a lot, or maybe they go to Florida for the winter, so they can be a foster in the summer, but they can't be a foster in the winter, and they don't want the responsibility, or they live in a condo in Florida that doesn't allow dogs, or something like that, right? So we desperately need fosters, both on the cat and dog side. And we provide all the veterinary care, the food, the equipment that you need. You provide the safe home, the love, we ask you to transport the animal to veterinary appointments and meetings with potential adopters. And then the animal repays you, usually with buckets of love. So fosters we need. Donors. We love all our donors, but our monthly donors are the ones that provide us with a solid foundation of revenue each and every month. So we have fewer peaks and valleys to have to deal with. There are lots of volunteer opportunities at the shelter. Today, there are fewer where you're interacting directly with the animals, but we need volunteers on the fundraising team, in the finance team. Even on the animal teams, we need volunteers who can manage the foster relationships, that kind of thing. So there's always needs for volunteers at EHS as well. But if all of that is outside of the realm of the possible, we need you to advocate for animal welfare and spread the word about EHS, because we think that those are really important things.
Right. 2020 was obviously a rough year for everybody. So how did EHS kind of adapt to the pandemic and pivot and change the way that they do things?
It's a great question. And I want to give full credit to the volunteers who demonstrated incredible resilience during this time, because not only were they dealing with the implications of the pandemic on their own personal lives and their work and their families, but they were also able to help us do the pivots that you talked about. So first of all, we closed the shelter to visitors, and probably about a week later, we closed the shelter entirely and moved all the animals into foster. So that was a mammoth undertaking to identify fosters for all of the animals that were currently in our care. So we did that. And then we paused intake and adoptions for about a month so that we could develop contactless procedures for bringing animals into our care and for adopting them out. So we needed to make sure that we were keeping the animals in places where they were safe, but also safeguarding our volunteers who had to interact with potential adopters and who had to go out to, say, other organizations to pick up dogs and cats. So we took about a month to come up with those procedures, and then we implemented those procedures. We implemented some electronic technology to help us maintain this contactless environment. So previously we had been in the world of paper contracts and checks, and we moved fairly quickly to e-transfers for adoption payments and electronic signing of contracts. So that's a benefit that will, stand us in good stead for a long time. We made some changes to the shelter because volunteers, although we weren't having volunteers in the shelter, we didn't have animals in the shelter. And so we didn't have volunteers caring for them. We still had lots of reasons to have volunteers in the shelter, preparing kits for fosters, receiving donations, that kind of thing. So we reorganized the shelter to minimize the contact between volunteers. And we also, later on, as we kind of learned a little bit more about what the pandemic was going to mean for us, we took the opportunity to make some facilities changes. We deep cleaned the shelter. We implemented new ventilation systems. We did all sorts of things that will just make it a better place when we're back in there with animals and volunteers. We moved a lot of volunteers out of animal care roles into other roles, just making sure that everybody stayed engaged as best we could. So we did things like that too.
And how did the adoption rates compare from 2019, for example, to 2020 during the pandemic?
Yeah, so in 2020, we adopted 117 cats, as compared to 133 in 2019. And on the cat side, we adopted 430 cats versus 420 cats in 2019. So they were about the same. Yeah.
Very similar.
Yeah, and not bad considering we didn't do any adoptions for an entire month. So
right.
Yeah.
So what changes are you now anticipating as we're coming out of lockdowns? Things are opening up fully this Friday.
Yeah. So we are not opening up fully this Friday. We are working on our plan for how we reopen, and our notional target is sometime in the fall that we will reopen. So we expect to reopen slowly. So first we would have animals and volunteers in the shelter, but we wouldn't have visitors. And then after we're settled and organized, we would have visitors by appointment. And then we think at some point in the future, we will be able to reopen to drop in visitors like we had previously. The one thing that maybe your listeners don't know is that our shelter is tiny. Like the facility is tiny. It's, between 5,000 and 6,000 square feet, and it's full of kennels and enclosures. And so there's not really an effective way to socially distance yourself at the shelter. And so we're just proceeding very carefully. Our first goal would be to have animals and volunteers in the shelter, because although our foster network is great, there are times when we need to have the shelter operational so that we can be nimble in terms of helping a dog or cat that particularly needs our help.
Perfect. And Cristina, EHS is also different, as in they're a non-kill shelter, and you mentioned that before. So what are some of the great programs that you offer? I know you have the Sanctuary program, for example. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the programs that animals here have that would not be offered in other shelters?
Sure. And we're particularly proud of the Sanctuary program and the Doggy Back to School program. And I'll talk a little bit about those. I will just say that when a dog or cat comes into our care, they are with us until they find their forever home. And so we've had dogs and cats with us for multiple years before they found their forever home. And that's a significant commitment that we are 100% prepared to make. Obviously, we'd love the animals to be in their forever home, but and to be in their forever home quickly. But sometimes we just can't do that because of an issue with the animal, whether it be medical or behavioral. And so to support that mandate that we have something called the Sanctuary program. And the Sanctuary program is funded by the Badal Foundation, and it allows us to offer care to animals that have a significant medical condition that prevents them from being adopted, and also allows us to support animals that require palliative care. And sometimes that palliative care process is lengthy, like a couple of years, but they're just not adoptable because of the implications of the condition that they have. So they know that when they come into the Sanctuary program, they are with us for the duration of their life. Unfortunately, with the animals that are palliative, it gets to the point where we have to make a decision about humane euthanasia, which is always based on the animal's well-being. Yeah. But we have graduates from the Sanctuary program as well. We had a dog surrendered to us. Who was her owners were going to euthanize her. And they told us, all the things that were wrong with her. We brought her into the Sanctuary program. We got her the medical care she needed. She was a little bit of a senior dog, but we were able, the person who was fostering her just fell in love with her. And once her medical conditions were cleared up, she was adopted by them and is living her best life. So we absolutely do have what I call graduates from the Sanctuary program. And those are the
best.
They're the best. They are absolutely the best. So the Doggy Back to School program is one that, we receive, again, some very generous donations targeted to this. So, and Sarah, you'll know this. Sometimes a dog will come in and they have a set of challenging behaviors.
Yes.
Maybe they are afraid of other dogs and they are terribly reactive around other dogs. Maybe they are afraid of people. Maybe they are just not they're not badly behaved, but they're just so big that they require the right training so that they behave properly so people can manage them. Whatever it may be, we make an investment through the Doggy Back to School program to get the dog the training that it needs so that its bad behaviors are minimized. They never go away, but they're minimized. And that we develop a really solid understanding of the animal And we then are able to place the dog with an adopter with essentially a manual. I mean, it's not written down, but it's like a huge knowledge transfer that says, this is how you make this dog successful. And we've had some really great stories of dogs that have gone into the program and that have come into us and have exhibited really challenging behaviors for us to manage, who've gone into the program, gotten the training that they've needed, and have come out the other end as the best family dogs. And so we're super happy about that. And we're actually anticipating that some of the dogs that were adopted during the pandemic, not necessarily from us, but just the general demand for dogs during the pandemic, we're anticipating that we're going to see some more behavior-based surrenders as people are finding that, hey, now that I go to work, my dog is stressed out or anxious. And so, it's a very, very important program for us right now.
Right. How do you anticipate that coming about? Like, you're right. Like, people had, this year off where they said, let me go get a dog. And now they're going to be going back to work. Do you foresee more people giving up their pets because of this reason?
Yes, we do. Anecdotally, we see some of it now starting to trickle in. And we hear from other rescues that they have this, that they are seeing this as well. So it may be that the dog was a wonderful asset and a wonderful part of the family when everyone was locked down and, all you could do is go for a walk in the park. But when you're leaving for work and you're leaving the dog alone for 8 hours, you may think to yourself, this is not the best for this dog. Or the dog may just, one of the things that I have seen is dogs are not used to people coming to the front door because people were not coming to the front door during the pandemic. And so a ringing doorbell can set the dog off. And so a little bit of training around ringing doorbells and people coming into your home can make a big difference for the dog. So we're anticipating that there are going to be people who aren't prepared to make that investment in the training, although we wish they would. And those dogs will be surrendered to us, we expect.
Right. So that's something we'll have to gear up and try and deal with as time goes on.
We're anticipating that, yes.
So, Cristina, you're in charge of fundraising. You had some very interesting campaigns during the pandemic because you couldn't do, some of the regular stuff that the Etobicoke Humane Society does, the regular fundraisers. So you went online. You had the cute pet contest that Angel actually came runner-up in. I was very proud of her. And some other innovative programs.
Yes. Yeah, we did.
Was that you?
No, it was not me. The fundraising team has a lot of really talented people on it. And really grateful for all their contributions. And they essentially, when the pandemic started, identified that the in-person events that we had planned for 2020 were targeted to raise us $85,000. And we had to find a way to raise the $85,000. So they came up with the Give What You Can campaign and Sweat for the Shelter and the pet photo contest and Mother's Day cards and Father's Day cards and any number of smaller fundraising activities that allowed us to do so remotely via email or on the website. And I will say that creativity was a blessing for us. Our fundraising numbers last year were up over the fundraising numbers in 2019. So despite the pandemic, the work of this team enabled us to exceed our goals for fundraising in 2020, which was tremendous. And we are actually looking to leverage some of those electronic-based campaign activity types of things going forward, because we think that it's a great way. Things like Mother's Day cards and Father's Day cards, I think a lot of people think that that's a really great way to give your mom or your dad something special when they don't need any more ties or, tea towels or whatever it is you give your mother for Mother's Day. So,
for sure.
Yeah. So very nimble in 2020 and a solid foundation for 2021.
I'm so happy to hear that, Cristina. You're doing such incredible work. I think we're so lucky to have you as part of this organization. Thank you once again. Cristina, can you leave our viewers with a tip of advice? It could be from a leadership perspective or in regard to the importance of giving to a nonprofit, anything that you could say.
Yeah, and I know you started this by talking about leadership, but I'm actually going to segue a little bit into animal welfare, and I hope that's okay, because the thing that I want to leave your listeners with is the hashtag adopt, don't shop. There are lovely animals, cats and dogs at EHS, rabbits at the Toronto Humane Society, all looking for homes and all wonderful animals. And I would really encourage your listeners to think long and hard about adopting a shelter pet if they are looking for an additional animal in their home. And if they are going to adopt, I would really encourage them to adopt from a reputable rescue. Please don't get an animal off Kijiji. We have seen numerous very sad cases of animals on Kijiji with significant illnesses, unknown behaviors, that kind of thing. So adopt, don't shop, adopt from a reputable rescue, and then be patient and be prepared to invest time into training and socialization for the animal you bring home. And they will pay you back 100 times over for that. And so that's the message I'd like to leave your listeners with. I hope that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Cristina, for your time. Once again, we all appreciate your service. And I know you're part of the fundraising team. So for your time today, I would like to, on my behalf, make a small donation of $1,000. I'm going to be coming to the Etobicoke Humane Society right after to drop off a check. And I know it's small, but I hope it helps the animals. And I can't wait to get back into the shelter and start my volunteer shifts again and see you all in person very, very soon as well.
Sarah, that's amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the time today and your interest in the work that we do, for your donation, and then for your ongoing commitment to EHS, because you're one of our volunteers, which is tremendous, but you are also so supportive in all of our fundraising campaigns. So I can't say enough great things about the work you do for EHS. So thank you.
You're very, very welcome, Cristina. Thank you so much for giving these animals a second chance at life. The home that they deserve is nothing more fulfilling than seeing an animal go to a forever loving home.
Well, you are 100% right there. So thank you again. Thank you for being part of that.
So, Cristina, if someone wants to reach out to the Etobicoke Humane Society, whether it's to make a donation or so forth, how do they reach you guys? Can you say the email address or the website for us?
Sure. The website is www.etobicokehumanesociety.com. So Etobicoke Humane Society is all one word. And from there, you can see the cats and dogs we have for adoption. You can volunteer, you can donate, you can read our annual report. You can, there's lots of other bits and good pieces of information on our website. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. And I would probably butcher the handles in those two social media platforms, but both of those are very popular places to find out more information about EHS.
And we'll list them in our bio as well when we post this.
Oh, thank you, because you'll get it right.
Thank you so much once again, Cristina. We really, really appreciate your time today. And like I said, can't wait to get back to the shelter and see you all in person very, very soon, I hope.
I look forward to that too. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.